Before he died, Peter Allen asked that no one wear black at his funeral. He wanted music, dancing, and color, a celebration of life, not a mourning of death. But behind that flamboyant wish lay a truth he never fully spoke aloud, even to those closest to him. Peter Allen, the dazzling showman who lit up Broadway stages and wrote anthems that stirred national pride, lived most of his life hiding in plain sight. He was the husband of Liza Minnelli, the son-in-law of Judy Garland, the Australian golden boy who made it in New York. To the world, he was the smiling entertainer who sang about Rio and his homeland with infectious joy. But away from the spotlight, he wrestled with a truth he couldn't share. Not in the 1970s, not even in the 1980s, not publicly, not safely. There were whispers. There were rumors. There were moments when he seemed on the verge of admitting it all. But each time, the curtain dropped just in time to protect his secret. And when he died in 1992, the official cause, throat cancer, was gently offered to the media. Few said the other word, AIDS. But many already knew. What makes Peter Allen's story unforgettable isn't just the glamour or the tragedy. It's the ache of what was left unsaid. The conflict between who he was and who the world allowed him to be. And how, even within that silence, he wrote songs that told the truth more loudly than words ever could. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the man who never stopped smiling until the music stopped. Peter Allen was born Peter Richard Woolnough on February 10, 1944, in Tenterfield, a quiet rural town in New South Wales, Australia. It was a place of isolation, far from the shimmering lights of Manhattan or the glamorous halls of Hollywood, but it was also where his love for music was first born. His grandfather taught him piano, and by his teenage years, Peter was performing in local pubs and clubs, already exuding the charm and charisma that would later define his stage persona. The 1960s in Australia were conservative, rigid, and socially restrained. There was little space for flamboyance, for emotional vulnerability, or for queerness. Yet Peter was all those things. And so, like many ambitious young Australians of the era, he looked outward to America as the stage large enough to contain his dreams. He found his first break as part of the musical duo The Allen Brothers, performing alongside Chris Bell. They soon caught the attention of Mark Herron, Liza Minnelli's then husband, who introduced them to the inner circles of American showbiz. And that's when Peter Allen's story took a surreal, almost cinematic turn. He became involved with Liza Minnelli, daughter of the legendary Judy Garland. Within a few short years, he transformed from an unknown singer from the Australian countryside into the son-in-law of Hollywood royalty. The wedding was glamorous, but observers couldn't help but notice a strange dissonance in the relationship. Peter adored Liza, but not in the way a man loves a woman. Their union, though affectionate, was more spiritual than romantic. This was the early 1970s, a time when the LGBTQ+ community remained largely invisible in mainstream entertainment. Coming out could mean professional suicide. For Peter Allen, whose career was just beginning to bloom, discretion became survival. Behind the scenes, his personal life was complex. He was part of the gay underground of New York, living two parallel lives: the smiling, charming showman in public and the man seeking freedom and connection in private. Despite the constraints, his creative output soared. He wrote hits for Olivia Newton-John, including the Grammy-winning I Honestly Love You, and launched a solo career that stunned critics with its theatricality. His performances were part Las Vegas spectacle, part emotional confession, with feathered costumes, daring dance moves, and heartbreaking ballads woven into a single act. He became a fixture on the American concert circuit, especially adored in New York and Japan. Yet Peter never truly belonged. Not to Hollywood, not to the straight world, not even entirely to his homeland. In Australia, he was loved but misunderstood. In America, he was exotic but enigmatic. The world embraced his songs without realizing that many of them were coded with longing, heartbreak, and a desperate yearning for authenticity. As the 1980s wore on, whispers grew louder. The AIDS crisis began sweeping through the creative community, devastating a generation of artists and performers. Peter had lost close friends, and the atmosphere of fear was thick. Yet still, he kept smiling, kept performing, kept hiding. His decision to never officially come out wasn't rooted in shame, but in an era that offered no safe place for someone like him to be fully seen. and so the stage became both his sanctuary and his mask. Through the lights and music, Peter Allen revealed just enough of himself to move millions, but never enough to expose the wound that pulsed just beneath the sequins. Peter Allen's rise to fame was unlike any other Australian entertainer of his time. After his marriage to Liza Minnelli in 1967, doors opened across Broadway and the American music industry. Though their union would last only 7 years, it placed him in an elite circle, surrounded by icons, legends, and expectations. But while the marriage was a fairy tale on paper, it quietly dissolved behind closed doors, with both Peter and Liza walking away with hearts intact but truths unspoken. By the mid-1970s, Peter had fully embraced his solo career. His stage shows were electric. He played the piano while dancing atop it, dressed in flamboyant costumes, with a grin that could disarm the most cynical critic. His energy was relentless. He wasn't just performing songs, he was living them in front of his audience. He became a regular on the Las Vegas circuit, sold out Radio City Music Hall, and appeared frequently on American television. But his true genius was as a songwriter. He penned hits for other stars, like Melissa Manchester's Don't Cry Out Loud and Olivia Newton-John's I Honestly Love You, which won Song of the Year at the Grammys. He was writing pain, love, and longing into lyrics others sang, often masking his own stories in voices that the world would more readily accept. Then came the moment that many consider his cultural peak, I Still Call Australia Home, a song that struck deep into the hearts of expatriates and natives alike. It became more than a ballad. It was a national anthem of nostalgia. Qantas used it in global campaigns. Australians heard it and felt home in their bones. Peter, despite being thousands of miles away, had captured something sacred. But even as he soared, shadows gathered. By the late 1980s, Peter's popularity began to wane. Tastes shifted, and his theatrical style no longer fit the MTV generation. His refusal to publicly address his sexuality kept him in a strange limbo. He wasn't fully embraced by the rising queer movement, nor did he maintain a mainstream pop presence. Privately, tragedy struck again and again. Friends began dying, one by one, from AIDS. The disease ravaged the artistic community, and Peter, though always composed in public, watched with growing dread. He lost his partner Gregory Connell in 1984, a devastating blow he never truly recovered from. Gregory had been not only his lover, but also his stage designer and closest emotional anchor. Peter's own health began to deteriorate, but he kept the truth close to his chest. The man who once pranced across pianos now struggled to walk. His voice, once joyful and bright, grew more fragile. And yet, he continued to perform, pushing himself through concerts, always in sequins, always with that infectious grin, as if he could laugh the darkness away. There was one final triumph. In 1995, The Boy from Oz, a musical based on his life, premiered in Sydney. Though he didn't live to see it, the show became a sensation and later went to Broadway, with Hugh Jackman portraying Peter in a role that would win him a Tony. For a man who spent his life writing music for others, it was a posthumous moment of truth, his story at last being told. But before that spotlight ever returned, Peter Allen's own lights dimmed. He retreated from the public eye, his once vibrant presence fading into silence. He died on June 18, 1992, at the age of 48. The cause was officially throat cancer, but those who knew better. By the time Peter Allen passed away in 1992, the official obituary said, throat cancer. No questions asked, no deeper inquiries. It was a quiet departure for a man who had lived his life under the spotlight. But among friends, collaborators, and those who had watched him fight through the final years, the truth was both known and quietly respected. Peter Allen had died of AIDS-related illness. He had lived a dual life for decades, not just as a public figure hiding his sexuality, but as a man hiding his own grief. When Gregory Connell, his longtime partner, succumbed to AIDS in 1984, Peter was shattered. On stage, he never mentioned Gregory's name. Off stage, he wore Gregory's ring around his neck. It was the most visible sign of a love he wasn't allowed to speak of. In private interviews, Peter confessed to friends that the loss of Gregory had left a void that no applause could ever fill. He became more reclusive, more fragile, but he still refused to come out publicly. Perhaps it was generational shame. Perhaps it was industry pressure. Or maybe Peter just didn't want to be remembered for a label. He wanted to be remembered for his music. Yet, the AIDS epidemic was swallowing artists like him by the thousands. Peter, despite his success, felt that isolation deeply. In his final performances, the sparkle was still there, but the edges were softer, more sorrowful. In Japan in 1990, he collapsed backstage after a show. Still, he didn't stop touring until his body forced him to. Close friends later recalled how, in his final months, Peter avoided public appearances. His once animated face had grown gaunt, his voice faint. He didn't want the world to see him that way. The boy who had danced on pianos, who had once dazzled Radio City Music Hall in gold lame, chose instead to disappear quietly, surrounded by only a few who truly understood. The media, respectful but cautious, never investigated too deeply. In the early 1990s, talking openly about AIDS, especially when it involved a closeted celebrity, was still taboo. Headlines referred to a long illness. The truth was whispered in theater halls, among musicians, in the gay community, but the public was never told directly. And perhaps the most haunting irony, the man who had written songs that laid his heart bare, who sang "Don't Cry Out Loud," had in the end cried quietly, hidden from the world. He never got the chance to tell his story with full honesty. It was left to others, years later, to piece it together. When The Boy from Oz opened, it was more than a musical, it was an act of redemption. The stage Peter once ruled now became the place where his truth was finally spoken. His music, his joy, his pain, and his identity, unapologetically laid bare. The public responded with tears and standing ovations, not just for the performance, but for the man they realized they never truly knew. Newspapers re-examined his legacy. Fellow performers shared memories of his generosity, his humor, and the quiet sadness he carried. The LGBTQ+ community embraced him posthumously as one of their own, a pioneer who lived with courage even if he never said the words aloud. In the end, Peter Allen didn't need to declare who he was. He sang it, he played it, and the silence he left behind now echoes louder than ever. Peter Allen's story is not just one of fame, flair, and feathers. It's a story of restraint wrapped in performance, of private heartbreak masked by public spectacle. And here at Aussie Uncovered, we believe his legacy deserves far more than nostalgia. It deserves clarity, recognition, and reverence. We see Peter not only as an Australian icon who triumphed on international stages, but as a man who quietly bore the weight of an era's silence. His life unfolded at a time when queerness was hidden behind tuxedos, marriages, and polite laughter. His success was groundbreaking, but the cost of that success was invisibility. He couldn't be fully himself, not to the media, not to the audience, not even to the country he always called home. He gave the world unforgettable music. I Still Call Australia Home remains a powerful emotional anchor for millions, a song that embodies homesickness, identity, and national pride. And yet, the man who wrote it couldn't safely say who he truly was. That dissonance is heartbreaking and important. Peter's story also prompts deeper questions. How many more voices from his generation were lost to silence and stigma? How many had to choose between authenticity and survival? And how many still live in the shadows of expectations, forced to smile through the weight of cultural denial? As a channel, we do not seek to dramatize pain for entertainment. But we also believe stories like Peter's must be told honestly. He was a pioneer, whether he intended to be or not. His stage presence gave other queer performers the courage to dream. His resilience, continuing to sing, write, and perform through unimaginable loss, is quietly heroic. Some may argue that Peter should have come out publicly, but to do so in his time was to risk everything. Instead, he left clues, songs that mourned, shows that shimmered with coded truth, and gestures that, to the observant, revealed his full humanity. We invite you to consider, how do we define legacy? Is it what someone says, or what they leave behind? For Peter Allen, his legacy is not only in the music, but in the growing understanding of the man behind it. A man who, in spite of the times, found a way to shine, brilliantly, if briefly. What about you? Did you know Peter's story before this? What do you feel when you hear "I honestly love you"? Or "I still call Australia home now"? Do you see them differently, knowing what he was carrying? We think you might. He danced across stages with glitter on his chest and a wink in his eye. He sang about home, about love, about joy, and he sang it like he believed every note. But beneath the sequins and songs, Peter Allen carried a truth he rarely named aloud, a truth that lived in the pauses between the lyrics, in the silences after the crowd stopped clapping. His story is one of contradictions, a man who made the world smile while privately grieving, a performer who gave his life to audiences but could never fully give them himself, a lover who lost the person closest to him and kept singing through the ache. And yet, he never demanded pity. He asked for music at his funeral, not mourning. He left behind a melody, not a message. Perhaps he knew that songs could say what he never could, that music, in the end, would be his truest confession. For a long time, Peter Allen's truth was hidden behind polite euphemisms and carefully curated narratives. But now, the curtain has lifted. We see him more clearly, not just as the boy from Oz, but as a human being who lived in a world that asked too much of his silence. And knowing that changes everything. It changes the way we hear "Don't Cry Out Loud." It deepens the meaning behind "I Still Call Australia Home." It makes his laughter more powerful, his glamour more courageous, his exit more tragic. Peter Allen didn't get to live his truth out loud, but we can remember it now in full. We can carry the legacy he never named, but always performed. Some stories were never meant to be known, but now you know.